Aye, now she is frightened. Peer Gynt rides first, and there follow him many. His steed, it is gold-shod and crested with silver. Himself he has gauntlets and saber and scabbard. His cloak is long, and its lining is silken. Full brave is the company riding behind him. None of them, though, sits his charger so stoutly. None of them glitters like him in the sunshine. Down by the fence stand the people in clusters, lifting their hats and agape gazing upwards. Women are curtsying, all the world knows him, Kaiser Peer Gynt and his thousands of henchmen. Sixpenny pieces and glittering shillings, over the roadway he scatters like pebbles. Rich as a lord grows each man in the parish. High o'er the ocean, Peer Gynt goes a-riding. England's prince on the seashore awaits him. There too await him all England's maidens, England's nobles, and England's Kaiser. See him come riding and rise from their banquet, raising his crown. Hear the Kaiser address him.
And if we were going to go on and do more of that, we would. I would then cut in saying, "Just look at Peer Gynt there, the drunken swine." But then we would just get into the whole episode. Yeah, thank you very much, Brian. Brian, you're the first guest to ever read at the top before. That's
yes.
To do the top reading. So there you go. Very nice.
This is all about first. Peer Gynt is about firsts. He's the first guy to do everything.
He was the first. Yeah, no. many
first guy to ride a reindeer, first guy to be a slave trader. Like
he came up with it. That's the crazy thing about.
And
Peer
he was
Gynt.
the first guy to stop being a slave trader too, because he realized it was bad.
Oh yes. Okay, so he gets all kinds of credit for that.
It's
surely.
a real Amazing Grace situation with Peer
Listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.
Welcome to the Socialist Shelf, the only podcast where we ride reindeer. I am Lenore.
You stole the Worst of All Possible Worlds, their intro thing, the only podcast for this one. But I think it fits. Yeah. I think it fits for this one.
Well, Peer Gynt was the first to do the intro, so I think
we were the first to come up with it.
Yeah, we had him for a couple of episodes, but we couldn't keep him on the payroll.
Yeah. Y'all might hear another voice. You heard it at the top. We have Brian Alford here from the Worst of All Possible Worlds. We're completing the trio. As y'all know, we've had AJ and Josh on. Welcome, Brian.
Hello. It's very nice to be here. I've had so many ideas of like books to pitch you on, but I'm an embarrassingly slow reader, and I would have to reread any of them before going on, and so I just never get around to it. And then you called me up and was like, let's do a play. I was like, fine, yeah, let's do a play.
Yeah, we've done a couple plays in the past. Obviously, we had AJ on do let's see if I get the name right, Intelligent Homosexuals Guide to Capitalism and Socialism with a Key to the Scriptures.
You got it.
And yeah, this is Peer Gynt, so it's a completely different direction. Brian, what makes Peer Gynt interesting to you? What's your background with this? Because I've heard the music Hall of the Mountain King.
Yeah.
But I have very little background with this.
That's the thing. Everyone's heard the music. They have no idea that it was written for a play.
Yeah.
There are at least 3 big songs that everybody like on Earth has heard from Edvard Grieg and his score for this play. But I first saw this play out of nowhere. I did we have a period between semesters where I went to college called interim, where it was like all of January you could potentially take off or take an accelerated course like a summer school class or do some sort of special thing. And I was studying German, and we went to Germany So it was a nice little trip to Germany. I was able to go to Berlin and see a bunch of plays and stuff. And on our trip through Germany, we spent like I want to say about a week in Husum. And one of our host families had a son who was doing a youth theater production of Peer Gynt in a
Wow.
A
nearby
youth
town.
theater production.
Youth theater. So they were all, so he was like 16, 17,
Wow.
something like that. And he was playing Peer. And the cast was anywhere from like 8 years old to 18.
My God.
It's such a stone cold classic in Europe. Like, you really have to understand, because it's something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense in America. You know, Shakespeare is the most produced playwright of all time. It's not even
Right.
close.
I think
This-
Ibsen's second, isn't he?
Ibsen is number 2.
That's
Ibsen
crazy.
beats Sophocles. He beats Kalidasa. Like, no one's getting produced as much as Ibsen, and except for, of course, Shakespeare.
I think at one point, it was like 06 or something, A Doll's House was the most produced play in the world.
Yeah, and it apparently goes between Dollhouse and Peer Gynt. Peer Gynt
Wow.
is oftentimes, and maybe historically overall, his most produced play, which is a weird thing because it's an extremely weird play.
Mhm.
So I saw it in German. I saw it was probably about 2 hours and 15 minutes long. I think that we had an intermission when I saw it. So of course a lot of stuff is cut out, as it always is. Just the same as doing Shakespeare. You're always cutting some stuff out. That's where the fun of it is. You can kind of
Mhm.
turn your own play and turn it into whatever play you want it to be. I didn't speak German very well. I don't speak German like at all anymore. And this was an old translation. The whole thing rhymed, which almost none of the good English translations rhyme.
Sure.
So my host family was like, "Did you understand any of that?" And I was like, "I kind of feel like I got, like, yeah, there were trolls. There was a boat. There was a guy who was really skinny and pale and
Scary guy that didn't want to let him into hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that's it. I mean, it speaks to the strength of the staging, of the acting. Like even
Yeah.
if you're watching Shakespeare, like something real impenetrable, like you can still kind of get the gist of what's going on.
Yeah. Like
Mhm.
my German was just good enough. Like I also saw Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf for the first time
Wow.
in German. And to be able to parse the twist of that play, which is a fucking weird twist. I was like, okay, I was pretty confident in my German then, and it is straight up non-existent now.
Mhm.
So that began a little bit of an obsession for me with Gynt and with the other not play that Ibsen wrote around this time, which was called Brand.
Yeah.
Neither of these plays, I'll say, I don't think I actually understand either one of them, but that's what appeals to me so much.
Well, you're in good company.
Yeah, they're so strange, and they were so popular when they were published. So obviously the Norwegians reading it were like, this guy's speaking right to my soul.
Yeah. Pure facts.
And anyone outside of Norway is like, what the fuck is going on?
Mhm. Exactly.
Like, his realist plays are pretty well known. A Dollhouse, which unfortunately was first translated as A Doll's House because of the very boring literary British translators that it had. Instead of
Really?
just being translated as A Dollhouse, which we have an English word for, it's the same word as in Norwegian. It's just one word. I hate calling it A Doll's House. It is totally unreasonable of me to be this upset about A Doll's House, but I am. I'm always
Translations can get hot sometimes.
Yeah.
We've dealt with this a few times on the pod here. We actually got like feedback about the translation of Three Body Problem, like free
really?
feedback from some guy in Hong Kong who
Oh,
was like, okay,
interesting.
but it doesn't carry over. The English translation's no good actually. And I'm like, I have absolutely no reference. Like I'm completely, disarmed here. I just have to take your word for it.
Wow.
But this one was interesting that I read the entire the early translation you sent me.
Mhm.
And I read some of the newer translation that rhymes. And while that's fun, it's fun to imagine, the whole thing being in verse.
Yeah.
The older one did feel a little more tangible to me, a little more soulful.
Yeah.
There was a little more to it to me.
I really like this. Is it 1907?
Something like that,
translation? I think it's it doesn't keep the rhymes like at all.
There's
But
a
it
few
does-
moments, but yeah.
Yeah. but it kind of does the Shakespeare thing where it's like we'll just use it as an exclamation point in a couple
Sure.
of places, but it does keep the meter throughout, so it still feels poetic as you're reading through it.
Well, and you really get sucked into it. Like there's bits where like the stage directions fall into that meter as well. Like, and I'm sure it's accidental, but like that's the frame of mind that it gets you in, and it makes it
Yeah.
very, very readable.
Lenore, do you have any history with this or with Ibsen in general?
Not with Peer Gynt, no. I read a Dollhouse in high school.
Brian actually has a gun. Y'all can't see it.
Yeah, he can shoot us through the internet. It's really weird.
Okay. The first time there was an adaptation that was done in English, because it was such an obscene play, Dollhouse, that they couldn't even do it as written. So the first time it was done in England, it was called like The Breaking of a Butterfly or some shit.
Wow.
And it wasn't until
To Pimp a Butterfly, yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't until Karl Marx's daughter did like a drawing room production of it with George Bernard Shaw that people were like, okay, we can finally do a Doll's House here.
What on earth?
Wow.
There's layers there.
And then it was adapted into Barbie last year and it made $1 billion. But yeah, no. So I've read Dollhouse. I saw Ghosts at one point a few years back, 10 years ago at this stage. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that play is fucking wrenching. I highly recommend everybody go look it up.
Ghosts is such an extremely unhappy play. And of course, like they say venereal disease on stage, so that was a big point of like censorship and controversy, and yeah.
This is mostly first for me here. I mean, did Dollhouse, and then I knew a guy who was like trying to do a translation of one of the early plays. I think it was The Burial Mound. Like trying to do his own translation in college. It was like an exchange student. I wish I had talked to him more. It was just a thing that I like remembered while I was reading this. I was like, there was a guy in one of my classes who was like weirdly into this. Yeah, that was like mostly the extent. Honestly, I wish I had read more of this and when I was getting an English degree. I think that would have been good. But instead of reading, honestly, almost anything written in the last 20 years. But that's a different tangent. We've talked about that. There's a surprising lack of literature written after the year 2000 that we've even covered on this show.
Yeah.
But this is actually really interesting. But I want to talk about Henrik Ibsen himself. Brian, you may be able to give me some supplemental information here. I did my own reading into this, but
I was extremely amused to find that Ib is like a Danified version of Jacob.
Oh,
is it really?
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Oh, that's fun.
Lot to unpack there. So we share a name. Both of our names mean heel grabber. Directly translate to heel grabber then.
Yeah. And so he's Henrik Heelgrabberson.
They call him Henrik Heelgrabberson.
I mean, you could render that in like written Norwegian, and I believe it.
Just put a slash to the O.
Yeah, it'll sound cool, actually.
Well, and Ibsen was a child of like Norway in the 19th century had like this massive petty bourgeois,
right?
Like that was sort of the main class. There's a letter I was trying to look up to see if like any references that Ibsen made to Marx or Marx to Ibsen. I couldn't find any.
He made some to the Paris Commune, which are interesting.
Oh, okay.
So there's some in between.
Okay.
But sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, I read a letter that Engels wrote to somebody where they were asking about probably because of Dollhouse, because they were talking about the woman question and about the class structure and development of Norway. And you could tell that Engels is really on one when he was writing this one, because he was like, no, when you look at Norway, their development is behind a lot of countries. It's more like 18th century England, but they're pretty normal in their development, unlike the Germans.
Well, Norway has an excuse. They have to fight all the trolls.
Yeah,
that's true.
Well, and Norway was like subjected to not subject. I don't quite understand all of the Scandinavian politics and everything, but like they were sort of joined up with Denmark, but Denmark was stronger than them. And then Denmark and Norway were on Napoleon's side, and Sweden and England were against Napoleon, and there was a war there. And so then they became sort of Swedish subjects or partners or whatever. And Ibsen grows up in this time where the countries that are developed are building steamships. You
Right.
know, we're changing all of global
Mhm.
logistics, and Norwegians are now accelerating their construction of sailboats.
Mm-hmm.
They're building more sailing ships than they ever have in the past.
It's an interesting place to be because you're in that like global economy, but they're also
Yeah.
serve a place where a lot of people are porting there. A lot of people are coming
Mhm.
in and out. You're getting a lot of exposure to people from other countries, both through
Yeah.
that, direct domination and that indirect economic domination. And yeah, he's like comes from a merchant family. His
Mhm.
parents were named, I believe, Nude and Marichin, if I'm saying that correctly. And
Yeah,
they're
we're gonna
both,
say a lot of Norwegian names
yeah,
wrong
I'm gonna
today.
get it wrong. You can't get mad at me because I'm like 1/10 Norwegian.
Yeah,
So
you can get
you're not
mad at
allowed to get
me
mad.
because
You're
I'm
not allowed to get
Swedish.
mad at me, actually.
So
There you
yeah.
go. We've they came from like what would be called like the aristocracy of officials is what they directly translate it. It's
Okay.
like government workers, merchants, they're running those circles.
Yeah.
Also, worth noting, his parents were related. They were cousins.
Woo.
So there's something there. And also it's interesting in a biography of him, it writes Ibsen was fascinated with the concept of incest as a result of this.
Yeah.
So
He would
don't
have been a
know.
weeb.
Yeah.
Yeah, that shows up, but he comes by it honestly,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, his
Um,
dad, I think, owned a distillery, and then that
Yeah.
went under. And his dad gave way to alcoholism. They didn't have any money, so they shipped Henrik off to
Yes,
be an
To where?
apothecary's assistant.
that is true. It has been overstated, I've read,
Okay,
that like
okay.
how devastated they were, but they lived on charity was the thing. They lived comfortably, but on the charity of family and of others. So
Okay.
it was a very humiliating position. So you actually see that in Peer Gynt here. Like
Yeah.
When
they
his
get
mother
more
is, yeah.
right. They get more devastated here than he did in real life. Like they were
Yeah.
able to ship him to an apothecary to be an assistant.
Right.
But the fact of the matter was they were like, oh, well, now because of our failure, like we're going to be in these social circles and everyone here knows I'm here
knows.
because my cousin basically, and they had to, I will say, but like there's one of his writings where like they said, oh, they only had to have like 2 maids or whatever. Like they still
Yeah.
had maids and stuff like because, but they had to like that the social whatever, like if they
right, that's what
didn't,
you
they would
do.
not be in that class.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And speaking of maids, when Henrik Ibsen was the apprentice for this apothecary,
Mhm.
he fucked the apothecary's maid, and at
Mhm.
18 years of age had an illegitimate son.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
And apparently maybe didn't even meet the kid, possibly.
Until 1890. They had one meeting. He asked for
Unbelievable.
money and was turned down. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Father of the year. Father of
Yeah.
the century.
At that point, he went to Oslo, Christiana at the time, to try and get in university. He did not get into university. So he just started working on plays. I believe his first play was Catalina,
Yeah.
and it failed to be staged. And the Burial Mound is around this time as well, the one
Yeah.
that I know nothing about, but this guy that I met in college one time was interested in.
Yeah, he
But
and
one of his works weren't successful around this time.
No, he was not. He got produced, but he wasn't doing very well. So this is about a 10-year period where he's hustling and struggling and really not making it.
Grind set Ibsen memes are important.
He's obsessed with Norwegian history the same way that Strindberg is obsessed with Swedish history. And if they both knew that I was comparing them right now, they'd both be very upset. But Strindberg wrote all these plays about mad Swedish kings in the same way that Shakespeare wrote his histories. And Ibsen was going further back and trying to find that sort of unique Norwegian character, writing about Catiline, finding that connection and that clash with the classics, with the Romans. And then he said, fuck it, I'm not going to write for the stage anymore. I'm going to write a book called Brand. And
that is really what launched him, it seems like,
yes,
to me. Like that's where he got success. I think it was interesting before that he worked at a couple theaters while he to pay the bills and got a lot of experience there. And we're even editing other people's plays. And like, there's definitely a lot of like, hey, this guy, I'm helping his play go on stage and nobody wants to read my damn play. Like that, there's, I haven't found where he says that explicitly, but it's just like impossible that you don't feel that way. Like he worked on over 150 unique shows.
Wow.
I read.
Wow. Did any of the stuff that he worked on, like as editor, survive?
I'm not sure. I'll be honest.
I'm sure it does, but
it would have had to.
It's not notable in the way that his own work is.
He also got married around this time to Susanna Thorson. They had a really hard time. But their child, Sigurd Ibsen, is important. Became Prime Minister of Norway, who helped cut ties with Sweden one day.
Wow.
So
Yep.
weird
So
connections here.
I think the cutting of ties with Sweden was in the 1910s.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
it was
something like
later.
that.
It was
Yeah.
but
Wow.
Henrik, yeah, it's crazy.
I
It's
didn't
crazy.
actually know that.
Oh, you didn't know that? Yeah, Henrik like raised this kid to be like
Wow.
fuck the Swedes, like literally, like, and he took it to heart. He was like, yes, sir, salute.
You can't
He
make a
apparently was
sequel
a
to the
better
Dance
dad.
of Death. Fuck you, August
Yeah.
Strindberg.
He was apparently a better dad to this kid than he was to the original one, but he was
Yeah.
actually married to the mother.
Yeah, that happens, I guess.
He went to Italy at this point and spent a lot of time there, in Germany, over in mainland. But yeah, Brand is at this time, does quite well, and Peer Gynt is 1867. And 1867 doesn't initially sell quite as well as Brand. Brand does really well, but Peer Gynt still like sells out multiple times and they have to do reprints. Like for a guy who had nothing, this is huge.
And for a little note on Brand, cut me off if you need to, because I could go on about Brand for forever,
go for it.
and no one gives a shit. But Brand is written like a play, just like Gynt is, but it's not a play, it's a book. This was a common type of writing at the time, right? If you read Faust 1 and 2, those are written like plays, but if you tried to perform them, it would be like 17 hours long.
Right.
If you but then people did perform them anyway.
Of course.
Another famous one is Nathan the Wise, which I think is just great. And that play, when first performed, was 7.5 hours long. It is
Holy
not
God.
7.5 hours good, but it's a good play. And that this was just it was a thing. People read Shakespeare more than they saw Shakespeare, and the popularity of those plays led to this idea of theater. Byron also pushed this with his and Shelley with their like translations of Seneca or whatever. They became a literary form unto their own self. So people would read plays that weren't really meant to be plays. And Brand spoke deeply to the very sick Lutheran heart of the Norwegian man of the 19th century. And it was such a big hit that Ibsen could then travel to the Mediterranean. And it was while on that vacation that he wrote Peer Gynt.
And Gynt as well, he said he didn't really expect it to be staged, though again it was. I mean, he's got props in here that are like the Sphinx and like a big clamp that puts your whole soul in it, and like
it's real ambitious. Like he's going to North Africa, he's got a cast of like a billion different people, you know, like princesses, slaves,
you gotta have like magic.
There's a scene where dead leaves start talking.
Yeah,
we are the leaves. We are your tears. We're all the deeds you should have done.
Ibsen just saying "fuck you" to the stage directors everywhere.
There's like a letter he wrote to Grieg when they got Edvard Grieg to write the music for this thing, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't know. They're gonna stage it. I'm not gonna really worry about it. Whatever they want to do." But I'm like thinking, this button molder, is he gonna have a ladle that's the size of a human? It's like, no, of course not. I don't know why you would think that, Henrik Ibsen, but he didn't understand why it would be a big hit on stage, but it became a big hit on stage.
It was. I mean, when I'm reading this, I'm like, there's a lot of fun give and take here, and they're if you've got a good, Peer Gynt, like a charismatic person could deliver. I mean, like and I looked up performances, and there's some really interesting stuff. Just to like wrap his life up, even though of course Gynt is our target here. He writes quite a bit more. He writes, The Emperor and the Galilean, Pillars of Society, Dollhouse, just his most performed work. All over the place.
Enemy of the People, really important.
Wild
work.
Duck. I don't know what that is, but
the Master Builder.
There you go. Reference to the Lego movie there, I think.
Yes,
Builder, or the other way.
There is actually a Master Builder movie with Wallace Shawn. And I do like the idea of someone mashing up the Lego movie with this Wallace Shawn Ibsen drama.
It's important. In 1906, he died. And I like this. It looks like this is true. This is one of these things that gets thrown around, I know, but apparently his last words, a nurse said he was feeling better, and he goes, on the contrary, and dies. I really hope that's true, because that is so funny. She's like, yeah, he's doing better, and he's on the contrary.
That's such a great final Ibsen line too. So many of his plays are someone saying like half a sentence and then the lights go out.
Yeah, exactly. Or just like saying, there's even moments in this where someone says something and it's immediately disproven, which I think is like a thing he thinks is funny, you know. Pierre just like, I am the emperor, I am the Kaiser, and then a guy said, look at this drunken asshole over here, you know, like it is.
Or somebody like takes something that somebody else says to like an illogical conclusion, and then Pierre's like, holy shit, what am I mixed up in?
Exactly. But you know, he was
weird.
obviously we already talked about how influential he is. I mean, 2006 was Ibsen year in Norway. They declared it the year of Ibsen. Delhi, India has an Ibsen festival. Europe loves this guy. I mean, it's almost impossible to overstate.
In 2006, they did a performance of Peer Gynt in Cairo in front of the Sphinx in the pyramids.
That is so
That's
sick.
incredible.
That's so sick. Politically, and this play is political in its ways, but not as connected to, you know, maybe the broader movements that were going on then. But like politically, Ibsen was considered himself an anarchist. So he has writings on I once again, I didn't find direct connections with Marx, but he was a big fan of the Paris Commune. He did have a really weird letter where he said if the Paris Commune had been less authoritarian, they wouldn't have gotten murdered. That's not true. They were going to murder them because they took over the city.
Yeah.
I also know that he wasn't there. He was probably getting fifth-hand information about what happened at the Paris Commune and just like spouting off. I mean, like I've spouted off on Twitter about something and I have like and been wrong, and I haven't. And I've had access to live video of shit. So like, you know, take that with a grain of salt.
Ibsen would have been incredible on Twitter.
Yeah, no, I can tell as well. He might not have gotten as much writing done, but
there was like some society he was a part of where there were some rules. They were trying to like get more involvement, like women could potentially do more with this literary society, and he was getting an honor from them, and so he goes up to the podium to accept his award, and he's like, why aren't women doing anything in this group? Why can't you let them do anything? What's wrong with all of you, you disgusting sacks of shit?
He's generally like, you know, he delivers on his stuff, and he has I like a quote that he said in a letter talking about if there was a his gravestone, or if there was a monument made to him. He writes, had I decide on an inscription for the monument, I should choose the words, his life was his best work. So to conduct one's life as to realize oneself seems to be the brightest attainment possible to a human being. It is the task of one and all of us, but most of us bungle it. And that's also very Peer Gynt right there. And I thought that was nice. He seems like a cool guy, quirky guy, but I don't think we've had a normal author we've covered on this entire pod. Authors are typically not very normal people. Octavia Butler, maybe. She seemed pretty normal. But
Octavia Butler, maybe. Cixin Liu, maybe. Like
Tony Kushner is a pretty normal guy.
That's true.
He hangs out.
That's true. Even though he wrote Iho, he is a pretty normal guy. That's true. We had like the spring of weird little guys was like a thing we said, just like a run of weird little guys.
Oh yeah, Edgar Allan Poe, Leo Frankowski, like who the fuck else?
There was a number. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis. Yeah. Oh, but yeah, all that setup is very important because, you know, you're in a completely different mindset for Peer Gynt. This did not come out last year. This did not come out in the United States. This is a completely different cultural mindset. This is based on largely on Norwegian folklore, and I'm probably going to butcher the name, but Asbjornsen's, Peter Christian Asbjornsen's Norwegian folk tales in 1845, which includes, you know, the story of a guy riding on a stag off a cliff and things like that.
There's a Peer Gynt like specifically from like the 1700s.
Yeah, it's a now. In some of his writings, Ibsen, like I think teasing people, was like, "Oh yeah, no, he's a guy we all know back home," which is pretty funny.
Well, so the Peer Gynt story, the Asbjornsen tales. This was part of a Western European fascination with folklore and the rise of ethnography. So the Brothers Grimm, of course, the most famous examples out in the German areas of Europe, and so you had this Norwegian equivalent as well. And Peer Gynt was just some guy you're hearing about third hand while going on a hunting trip for reindeer. And I love the way that the story ends is him accounting Anders, the guy who's telling the story, saying like, yeah, Peer Gynt was strange. He just said a bunch of shit. And he always just said that anything that happened to him, but you knew it happened to somebody else.
It was
Yeah,
yapping.
and I mean, and in the in that larger context that you mentioned of this being like an ethnography, right? Nation states, right, are still a relatively new construct around this time. You
Yeah.
know, the idea that yeah, I come from this land that has these defined borders and like this culture that goes back, and so you have a lot of people mining folklore to sort of produce a unified sort of legendarium, you know, for
Yeah.
their respective lands.
Well, especially in somewhere like Norway where they don't have full control over their own borders, right? They don't have a
Right.
full political control.
Fun fact, because we mentioned the Scandinavian royals and where they fell in the Napoleon like sort of
Yeah.
shakeup. Um, Sweden's royal family is of French extraction.
That's right. Yeah.
Going back, like they
The
adopt.
lingua franca was French in the court.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and
Mhm.
they elected because the old king, I believe, had died heirless, and so the Riksdag elected this French marshal who they were like, you seem cool.
As Lenore knows, I've been obsessed with the English Civil War recently, and I've started
Okay.
looking into monarchy genealogies, and I'm like,
Okay.
oh, what the hell? You're trying,
Oh yeah.
like, has there been a real king of England in 500 years, or are these all
Oh my.
pretenders to the throne?
Oh my God. Have you seen
These
that
are
one
all
green
Scott pretenders to the throne. What's
have you seen that
happening
one green
here?
text where like the girl's venting about her boyfriend having really weird political views, like not reactionary or anything, but he's just like, yeah, he doesn't believe there's been a legitimate king of England since like the 1000s.
I feel that way.
He calls them all
And
Arivis Germans.
Peer Gynt was actually the king of England. That happened to
Yeah.
him, but he got
Yeah.
deposed. Anyway, does any of you want to take a crack at like what this is about?
Oh boy.
It's about a
Well,
cool guy.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's really cool. He's a man of 1,000 origins, 1,000 faces. Like, cause I mean, his mother also lays it out right in the first line of the play. Peer, you're lying. To which he
Mhm.
responds, "No, I am not." And right away I'm like, okay, so this is what this is all about, right? He's a liar. He's a young guy who, you know, spins a great yarn, and you're like, okay, in those first two lines, you know that that's going to be the conceit of the play is him living up to, you know, whatever lie he finds himself in at the time. Like the mom saying, you know, you're lying. She's calling him out. This is basically your Shakespearean father telling your his daughter that the world is cruel, right?
Mhm.
Something's up, and that's going to be the conceit of it.
He does immediately, yeah. He tells this story about how the reason he came home hunting and he's dirty and he doesn't have any meat is because he found this beautiful, beautiful stag and he tried to kill it and he ended up riding it off a cliff into water. And his mom believes him for half a second. I mean,
Yeah.
he's going and he's like, you know, breathlessly I stood and listened, heard the crunching of his hoof, saw the branches of one antler. Softly then among the boulders I crept. And he says, you know, such a buck, so sleek and fat, you, I'm sure, have never set eyes on. And she says, oh, no, of course not. And then he says, forthwith, he flew right over Ginton Edge. And she says, Jesus, save us. And he goes on, God, save us. And then she's crying out and she's so scared. And, you know, said, with the wild rush of speed wherewith we shot downward, she says, Pierre, God help me, quickly tell. And yeah, he does the whole thing. And she starts going, you know, oh dear Lord, what thanks, what praise should be thine who helped my boy. There's a rent though in your breeches, but it's scarce worth talking of when one thinks of what dreadful things might have come of such a leap, and then stops suddenly. Oh, you devil's storyteller, cross of Christ, how you can lie. And then she says, all this screed you foist upon me, I remember now. I knew of it when I was a girl of 20. Gudbert Glesne it befell. And then he says, me as well. Such a thing can happen twice.
I love that. Like, not only is he lying out his ass, but he's lying about something that happened to somebody else.
Yeah.
Like, and whether that was a lie or not, we don't really know. But
Yeah.
like, he doesn't have an original like yarn in his head.
Yeah.
Gudbrand Gludsney would not lie about something like that.
No, he's a very
Yeah.
trustworthy guy. Well, and that shows you like, it's this very Scandinavian thing. It's the old saga tradition. I remember, I don't know if I was reading or listening to something about the Icelandic witch hunts, which, someone came there. There's a story of a man and his mother who were killed as witches because they lived out in the Icelandic hinterlands, got into town, didn't know that there had been a whole cultural shift while they were, since the last time they were in town. And he's like telling these stories. He's like, oh yes, and our treacherous path to the city, that we came across a roaring river. We had no means by which to cross it. And then mother said, river, cease. And the river stopped and let us cross over dry land. And then they're like, you're a witch. Your mom's a witch. We're going to kill you. Get fucked.
He was just trying to lie. He was just trying to get, clout. But
yeah, he was just doing the thing that all Scandinavians do or did do. I don't think they do this anymore. They just watch depressing movies and think about gender or whatever.
Whatever y'all get up to up there.
They don't tell rivers to cease anymore because of woke.
Yeah.
Well, because they killed everybody that could do that.
But I think
how do you pronounce the mother's name, by the way?
I am not
Aze?
the person to ask, unfortunately. Aza, I think,
Okay.
but
It's
mother.
well because it's like the weird like A
Got the
with
little
the like
circle
circle.
on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that like Ulza or I
The
don't know.
American mind cannot comprehend. Yeah.
And this is another confusing thing. It's like, is this written in Norwegian or is it written in Danish? There has been like a little war on Wikipedia's first paragraph on like Henrik Ibsen's Wikipedia page, whether he wrote in Norwegian or wrote in Danish or wrote in certain styles of Norwegian. So again, I just don't ever know what's going on up there.
Right. We don't read the languages. We don't speak the languages.
But I've seen this play a number of times. I have even AJ worked on AJ Diddy, also from my podcast, playwright, worked on
check out his episode. Yeah.
The Boyg. And the Boyg is something of an adaptation of Peer Gynt, but it's also a story of real members of like the Norwegian intelligentsia who were imprisoned by the Nazis during the Quisling occupation and everything. And specifically about Per Krogh, the artist who also wrote illustrated an edition of Peer Gynt. AJ hates this play, by the way. I could never do this on our show because I think AJ and Josh would both be very frustrated with me. They're very modern men. I am very not modern. And I love this weird 200-year-old shit. And the less I understand it, the better.
Does he decide what the Boyg is? Because we don't really get a sense of that in this text.
Yes, he does. And the thing is, you don't get a sense anywhere else because the Boyg comes from that Peer Gynt fairy tale. And it doesn't explain itself there either. It's this seemingly impossible topological thing that can exist both inside and outside of his house. It's a troll that's maybe a snake with a human face, maybe, is what you can possibly glean the most from. But
if Lovecraft was not that scary, like, because you're just like the Boyg. I can't be scared of it. It's called that. But
and Boye, I have looked up how to pronounce this, and I still probably did it wrong. But Boye means like bend or crook. So it's like I am the bend. That is what
makes sense.
Like the I'm thinking right now of what Kwisatz Haderach means, right? The shortening of the way, like the thing that facilitates the qualitative shifts to the next thing, right?
There we go. Well, basically, Pierre being this known liar and this known rapscallion about town, it's also worth noting that his father, John Gynt, was a wealthy man who, much like Ibsen's own father, things went bad. Things went poorly. It went more poorly even because they did not have this rich family to give them charity. They now basically live at a farmstead that they can barely hold on to. And they just remember like their father would always, he drank it away. He had grand parties and he couldn't maintain the lifestyle. So they're sort of fallen among the perception of everyone. And it doesn't help that Pierre goes around like fucking lying all the time.
Yeah. I love the way that his mother puts it. Like, where now are the sacks of coin left behind by Rasmus Gynt, the grandfather? Your father lent them wings, lavished them abroad like sand, buying land in every parish, driving around in gilded chariots. Where is all the wealth he wasted at the famous winter banquet, wherein each guest sent glass and bottle shivering against the wall behind him? Literally, people just like breaking shit because Because it's there to break. There will be more.
Yeah, and they're just an embarrassment. He's
Mm,
just this embarrassing, impoverished drunk. His mother is derided as a crone, and
Hmm.
it leads to this isolation of Pier and Aza, where they have this very intense relationship
Hmm.
where she's telling him stories. We get a little bit of that in her kind of final scene where she talks about all the ways that she sort of protected him from the knowledge of not having a father, from the knowledge of that poverty, wearing blankets as coats and going out sledding, singing him songs, and him growing up to tell grand stories of riding a stag off of a cliff, and that's why I couldn't get groceries today.
Mm.
Like,
And she believes it half the time too. And
yeah,
like maybe believes it, maybe just wants to believe it, but they've like fed each other this sort of thing and they spend a lot of time together and there is a genuine affection. I mean,
yeah,
she'll
hmm
do the thing where she's like, you're the worst. But then like the second he's in the like slightest danger, she's like freaking out. Like, no,
yeah.
it's very much like I can say that about my kid, someone else
Mhm.
can't. That's
Yeah.
cross-cultural.
Yeah.
That's human right there. I can say it about my family, you can't say it about my family. But Pierre is like, she's telling him not to go to this wedding, and he like puts her on top of a house and traps her up there. Like that's how he is. Like he doesn't hurt her. He's like not violent with her, but he's
No.
just like, you're going. I'm even trying to picture how that even worked. But like once again, it's a difficult thing to stage. But he
Yeah,
like puts her on a house.
he has her riding on his back because he's gonna carry her across the river, and then she nags him too much. So he just climbs on top of the mill and just sets her down.
Hmm. Not respecting your mother in that situation. But
No.
he's going to a wedding where we see how everyone treats him, which is like literally everybody in town. I mean, like they ahead of him
Ugh.
getting there, all the girls say, "Okay, let's all let's all ignore him." He shows up and says, "Who's the liveliest girl?" And as one, they say, "I am not." Like Jesus.
They all just turn away from him one
Oh,
after the
it's
other.
I'm not
There's
Spartacus. I'm going home.
yeah,
there is
exactly.
this blacksmith who has his fucking number. He
Hmm.
hates this guy. He wants him gone. He just can't stand Pier fucking Gynt.
Hmm. There, we don't know what the backstory is there, but
Yeah.
they've definitely it's been beef for a while. I think he was lying to his mom about even having fought this guy. Like
He
Yeah.
was, but like he straight up says that yeah, I'm lying just this once because like you don't want to know the truth. Like I'm
Yeah.
doing you a favor by telling you like no, I actually didn't get my ass kicked that bad.
mhm, exactly right. But because he gets so disrespected, he runs off with the bride, Ingrid,
Yeah.
which I thought was going to be a little more important, but it's just, I think, another thing where he's just disrespecting the culture, disrespecting the customs.
Yeah.
But it's showing Pierre has Riz, right? He has a lot of like he's personable, he's interesting, I imagine him like, handsome or whatever.
Mhm.
Interestingly enough, Charlton Heston did a film adaptation where he
Yeah.
played him. It's actually Charlton Heston's first ever movie he was
He was
in, which is crazy.
Really?
18 years old. This was a silent film because it was 1941 because it was a
Mm.
student film. It was made by a bunch of Northwestern students. The director of that Peer Gynt adaptation with Charlton Heston later went on to do almost nothing in his film career, except he did direct one of the most important movies of all time, which is a movie called They Saved Hitler's Brain.
Oh.
hmm
A movie about mad scientists in South America, and they just have this glass jar that's got a little Hitler head in it that keeps yelling at them, but you can't really hear it because he's in a jar.
Fascinating. Well, regardless, imagining like a young Charlton Heston or something like he's a
Yeah.
charming guy. He's whatever. Like he's able
He's
to
strong. He's super. He's like Paul Bunyan
yeah.
almost, or Pecos Bill.
I mean, he's
He's
able to
somebody.
throw his mom up on top of a mill quite
Yeah.
easily. So he's
There's
able to run away with Ingrid and also
yeah.
meets another woman who is quite important here
Yeah, and
as well.
he has to get rizzed up by the wedding guest to do that. Like he's like, I'm not gonna drink, and then they tell him to drink, which is peer pressure.
Hmm. Uh, oh my
Hey.
God. Call that peer pressure.
But yeah,
He
I
meets
get
Solveig here as well.
Yeah.
yeah, Solveig, who's like the reason that Pier's here in the first place is because like he fumbled Ingrid hard and like
Yeah.
now somebody else is gonna marry her. But then there's like Solveig, who's like the girl next door who like he kind of rebounds to later on.
Yeah. Well,
He does her dirty is what he does.
and the groom, right, the guy who's getting married to Ingrid, Mads Moen, he is totally under Peer Gynt's spell. He's like the one guy in town who likes him, and he believes everything that Peer has ever told him. Like he's just like, and he thinks like, who's gonna help me get her, because she kind of ran off after the wedding. She like locked herself up in the room. He's like, who could help me? Peer Gynt. He's such an upstanding young man. And then Pier's like, I'm gonna go climb on a mountain and we're gonna fuck for a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna fuck your wife. He didn't want her before the wedding, and now he does, because his mom was like, you could have had her, and he's like, well, now she's getting married, now I want to fuck her. Like,
and the next time you see him too, like he's hauled her off and they're both kind of walking along the ridgeline. She's like, I love you, you're so great. And he's like, why are you still here?
Devil take the tribe of
Peer
women,
moment.
all but one. Who is that one, pray? 'Tis not you. Peer Gynt, ultimate tsundere.
Yeah,
like,
no, Peer Gynt is posting like Sigma memes.
Yeah,
like,
but like
100%.
this thing with Solveig is like, she shows up. There's this recurring image of like her book, her prayer book in the silver clasp, and she really doesn't give him much of the time of day at all. He talks to her for a little bit, then he threatens her. He's like, I'm gonna turn into a troll and show up in your bedroom and literally eat your pussy. I will bite it off of you.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, okay then, bye. But it's while the whole town is the lynch mob is searching for him. Pier's mother and Solveig are also searching for him to try to save him. And as that's going on, Asa is telling Solveig all of these stories about Pier and making him into this larger than life figure.
Exactly right. So it influences, but you know, Pierre has to run away. And he starts to even dream of going to like a far away land. He has a part that I like, where he's like looking at hawks. And he says, you know, tower over tower arises. What a glittering gate. Stand will you stand, it's drifting further and further away. High on the vane, the windcock arches his wings for flight. Blue spread the rifts and bluer, locked is the fell and barred. What are those trunks and tree roots that grow from the ridge's clefts? They're warriors heron-footed. Now they too are fading away. A shimmering like rainbow streamers go shooting through eyes and brain. What is it, that far off chiming? What's weighing my eyebrows down? How my forehead's throbbing, a tightening red hot ring. I cannot think who the devil has bounded about my head. So he has that, but then he, in a minute, then says, I'll fly. I will wash myself clean in the bath of the keenest winds. I'll fly high. I'll plunge myself fair in the glorious christening font. I will soar far over the Seder. And he goes on for a while, but it's like he's going through this moment where he's like waking up after this crazy thing. He has a hangover so bad it's like tight around his head. He's looking at beauty and he's going back and forth, and he's just like, I'm gonna go away, I'm gonna go on the wind, I'm gonna be a bird. You know, it's this guy who's just like very all over the place, very manic with his like activity, and he doesn't have a great sense of self-identity, and that's important too. And this is how he gets sort of lured or brought into the home of the trolls, basically, pretty soon after this.
Because when you
this state of mind,
because when you have that sort of, when you're still kind of looking for who you are, you know, it's very easy to latch onto a cause, to latch onto a person, and to make grand pronouncements of, okay, yeah, I've found my purpose. Like right at the beginning of scene 5 in this is Act 1 or 2, wherever. He's met the green clad one who's like the troll princess. And
yes, there are trolls in this, by the way.
yes, welcome to Norway. And
that's normal there. Yeah.
So the imagery of like him drawing his finger across his throat to swear is really interesting to me for reasons that we'll get into in Act 4. But yeah, so as true as my name is Pierre, as true as that you are a lovely woman, will you have me? You'll see what a fine man I'll be. You shall neither tread the loom nor turn the spindle. You shall eat all you want till you're ready to burst. I never will drag you about by the hair, nor beat me. No, can you think I would? We king's sons never beat women and such. I love how he just drops that. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm royalty.
Yeah. Well, and it should be noted too, this moment where he meets this woman in green. He has walked by these 3 like shepherd girls. I don't know why it's one of those things where like, what are they doing here? But they don't seem quite real. They don't seem
Mhm.
quite normal. They're almost like Norns or the Sisters of Fate, perhaps.
Mm.
Well, maybe.
And after he talks to them, because these women are, or they could just be like nasty country ladies who are just out to fuck trolls, because that's
Yeah.
what they're doing.
That's the
And
type
he's
of
like,
shit they're into. Yeah.
yeah, you the three of you want to fuck trolls? What if you all fucked me instead? And then presumably after fucking these three strange women, he hits his head on a rock. He
Right,
runs
that's when he
straight
meets the
into a rock,
trolls.
and that's when this. So you're like, okay, are we in a dream right now? Like, is all of this part of some fantasy? That's certainly what he believes after it's all done.
Mhm.
But then it starts to become a lot more
Right,
complicated.
it hangs over his life.
There's
But,
sort of a total
yeah.
recall element of it. It's like, is there a point in this play where everything just becomes the inside of Peer Gynt's mind? Is it the point where he hits his head? Is it the point where he's in the asylum? Is it,
Yeah, because there's like elements of fantasy that he runs into right here,
Mhm.
with the trolls and everything, with the Boyg, and then they come up again later in his life, like long
Mhm.
after the fantasy should have ended.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, step into Peer Gynt's dark, twisted fantasy, basically. You know, his twisted mind, people can't comprehend. And this is also where you get, some of the most iconic music like ever in the
Ever
score.
written ever.
Just
Like,
period. Yeah. Like I am curious, Brian, how is that when that's staged? How does the music line up? Because I'm thinking at the end of that song, there can't be dialogue. It would be impossible.
yeah,
It's so
well,
loud.
the original way that it's written, and you can hear usually what you're hearing of in the Hall of the Mountain King is a symphonic suite that's based on the original tune.
Mm,
Because like Grieg was like, oh, I was spitting. So I'm gonna
sure.
repackage all this stuff for symphonic orchestras to perform and everything like that. But for the play itself, there is a chorus that sings at the end, and they're all singing the like grab him, slash him, gouge out his eyes. That's what they're
Mm,
singing there. So that's at the very end of the scene. I don't know how this would work in normal staging, whether there are vamps in this that help to cover time to play through the whole thing. The only time I have ever seen a production of Gynt that used any of the Grieg music was there was a New York Fringe show that did a gay Peer Gynt
ah,
that really advertised itself as being sort of Gynt inspired, but about a gay guy living in New York.
peer,
Queer
peer,
Gins.
peer
Right?
gate.
Serving Gynt.
Serving Gynt.
But the only thing that they really, it was mostly just like a straightforward Peer Gynt, but he was gay this time.
Mm,
However, when he gets into the Hall of the Mountain King, it's a leather bar, and they play like a house music version of In the Hall of the Mountain King.
Oh, hell yeah.
So that's the only time I've ever heard anyone use his music, and it was more just like as a dance break. Where in this, of course, they get Peer Gynt to become a troll. He doesn't even have to renounce his Christianity. They're like, that's fine. It's really more about like how you're dressed than anything else. It's almost like there are new formations of class that are emerging around this time.
right. Exactly.
But in the gay one, of course, they take his shirt off and put a leather harness on him.
There you go. That is essentially what is happening in the scene,
Yeah.
though. That's important, for the listeners to know if you haven't happened to read Peer Gynt. At this point, the troll king is like, yeah, you can marry my daughter. Yes, no, it's as weird as it sounds. It is as crazy like a turn as it sounds. There is a troll king. He has all these monsters around him, and they're like, you don't have to renounce your Christianity. You can still be who you are. You're gonna need to wear a tail. And you're gonna need to wear these weird clothes, like Brian said. There's definitely something about the aristocracy, and
Yeah.
there's something about class and representation. And then they have this very important, sort of thing here where they define what the
Yeah.
difference is in a troll and a person.
Mhm.
And they say, humans say to thyself be true, trolls say to thyself be enough. And to them, that is the most important thing for him to adopt, for him to become of the troll people. And he supposedly rejects them. He says, no, I don't want you to do all these troll changes to me, even though he's flirting with it. And then that's when he like gets jumped by a bunch of like little monsters and beasties.
They're like, well, you've already fucked my daughter.
Right.
And
exactly.
she is pregnant. We're trolls. We just know that. So you have to be a troll. And the only way to truly make you a troll then is we're going to have to like gouge out one eye and cut up the other one to literally change your perspective on things.
Right. And he does not want that, obviously.
Yeah.
So he supposedly doesn't become a troll.
Yeah.
Manages to flee. But as we'll see, he does live his life very much by to thyself be enough.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, if you want to boil it down to selfishness, you can.
Yeah,
but
I would translate this line a little bit differently.
Go for
Not
it.
as a Norwegian speaker, but just as in terms of the way the language works in English. I would go straight back to the Shakespeare quote that this is paraphrasing, to thine own self be true. So man says, to thine own self be true, while a troll says, only to thyself be true. Right? There is something about simply being the self that I think is better highlighted here. He does use nok in the Dano-Norwegia, whatever language it is, which is Danish for enough. And then he says, put that on your coat of arms. But the way that I personally, Brian Alford's Peer Gynt, whenever I get around to it, and I unseat Will Eno and Gynt, that's how I would translate that phrase.
That makes sense. And it is, obviously there's the baseline of just, being a guy who cares only about yourself, but there's also the fact of Pierre being this creation of his own self and his mom's sort of fantasies and lies and tales they tell themselves, and also coming from wealth but no longer having it, no longer having a status, not having a job, not having anything that grounds you, not having community. He has his faith sort of when it suits him. How is he going to be enough to himself? What is himself? What is him? And obviously you're getting into some very wild notions here, but that is what Ibsen is trying to play with. Ibsen is trying to play with, like, well, what is the self? Well, what is the soul? What is the person? Later on, he'll even talk about what is having a soul or not. What is the material of a man and where does it go? Gynt, it does not, how is he going to be true only to himself? It doesn't all quite make sense. But he does live his life from here on out. And let's be honest, prior to this as well, by the troll mantra, not by just, I'm going to find out who Gynt is supposed to be and be that person. Rather, it's like, I'm going to go after what seems really cool to me in the moment. And and the trolls don't make him do that. He was doing that. He stole a guy's wife yesterday, like that's how
he always has an escape plan. Right? That's another thing that he emphasizes. You never go all the way. You never go so far that you're going to be stuck and you'll sacrifice everything. You always have to have a path out.
Yeah, he has an escape plan, and he has, people that can catch him. Like when he runs into the Boyg, which is first of all, the Boyg seems to have himself figured out in exactly the way that Pierre does not, right? He says, "What are you?" He says, "Myself," right? Which, shades of Tom Bombadil there, right?
Absolutely.
Right, that's something that has this perfect perception of itself is imperceptible to him, right? Is formless to us. And yet he's still able to defeat them because who exactly saves him? Is it the girls from earlier? Is it like harpies?
That's a good question.
Because it's bird cries, right? Bird cries, like Boyg, there he's fallen, sees him, sisters make haste, all that. And the Boyg, like the stage direction listeners, is literally shrinks up to nothing and says in a gasp, "He was too strong. There were women behind him."
Yeah. They are written down as birds. This whole scene as written is in pitch blackness. I'm sure usually is not going to be staged quite that way, but you could have some like black light glowing elements or something. But the birds refer to each other as sisters. He refers to them as sisters. Are they the women from before? It's really, really unclear. Maybe there's some sort of bit of Norwegian folklore that if you're a Norwegian in the 1870s, you're like, oh, that's that thing. But it's not something I have come across at all. And it's such a confusing scene. It's like this entire guy shows up and he's like, here's my thing. And then he's gone.
I was under the impression, and I might be completely wrong, that this had something to do with the birds earlier that made him want to go on the sky and on the wind. But there's nothing that says that, it could also be different birds. But, I kind of expected them to come back. And they didn't. Nope. But once again, a lot gets lost, not just in translation, but also just time and that this didn't come out yesterday.
And it's a picaresque, it's like
Right.
Candide or the Golden Ass or whatever. You're gonna come across the thing and then move on to the next thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And something I would write today that's set in modern day might have something that is funny or a reference you might know or something, even if it's not a
Right.
super pop culture referential thing. It's just gonna, even I wouldn't even maybe know it. It would just be in there, you
Yeah,
might even
yeah.
not realize. So
You
one
might
of those
introduce the podcast episode in a way that you've heard elsewhere, for example, just because of the osmosis.
It happens. It happens.
Or do a bit where you take the name C.S. Lewis and put whatever you can into
I
CNS.
swear I had never listened to that episode at the time.
It's great. I love everyone. I think it's a normal human inclination to try to make sense of C.S. Lewis.
It is a normal human inclination to serve cunt. Yes.
Yes.
Neither here nor there, maybe worth cutting, but apparently Tolkien, when he was mad, would call him Clive instead of Jack, and I think that's very funny. It's a very old married couple thing to do.
It is.
And in his letter, talking about how Narnia is bad, he called him Clive, so that's pretty good. He says something along the lines of, "So the line is Jesus. You don't have to write a character." But that's
what Final Fantasy 16 is about.
There you go. Sorry, Ryan. I know that has nothing to do with anything. So if you're listening to this, but okay. So to kind of bring it back on track, Gynt is now he's got to kind of go live out by himself. He's got to brave the wilds. He's not welcome back in polite society. He was barely welcome in polite society before. And Solveig decides to abandon everything for Peer Gynt. She's just can't stop thinking about him.
For a brief moment after his Boyg encounter, he saw Helga, Solveig's sister, and he takes a silver button off of his clothes and hands it to her as like a, please tell her, that I was here, that I want to see her. And it turns out that button becomes more important. That button is something that he melted down as a child, thinking he had grabbed a lump of tin, and his father was like, "Oh yeah, go ahead, take it," not realizing that it was pure silver, because he was so drunk. And maybe the concept of buttons and being melted down into a button will come back later for some reason.
But that's a thing that happens to everybody.
But yeah, Solveig shows up and she's like, "Okay, yeah, I'll marry you."
And I mean, Gynt's been miserable out here. He's been hewing at trees and coming up with stories about the trees, and then realizing there's no one to tell his bullshit story to, and like being like, well, that's not true.
And he can't leave the forest. He is forbidden by law from leaving the forest. And they've taken all of his stuff, all of his mother's stuff, including that ladle where he made that button. And so it's like he has become a forest creature by decree.
Yeah, he's a Boyg of himself. And Solveig decides she wants to join with him anyway. She says, all that your mother told me bore me a message that brought forth others when dreams sank upon me. Nights full of heaviness, blank empty days brought me the message that now I must come. It seemed as though life had been quenched down there. I could nor laugh nor weep from the depths of my heart. I knew not for sure how you might be minded. I knew but for sure what I should and must do. And Pierre says, but your father. And she says, in all of God's wide earth, I have none I can call either father or mother. I have loosed me from all of them. She's completely cut herself off to, once again, basically become a creature of the forest, to live in the house with the antlers hanging over the roof.
She has this great bit where she was, and I'm paraphrasing, but she's like, the hardest part of it was leaving my mother. Well, except for the really hardest part, which was leaving my sisters. Actually, no, leaving my father was the hardest part. Well, when I think about it, no, the hardest part was leaving all of them.
Don't worry, Peer Gynt is going to make up for all of it. He's going to treat her really well.
He has his happy ending.
Yeah, no, I know this play seems like it's going to go on for a really long time, but no, it's over here.
It's over.
Yeah, there's one hell of a time skip from being an outlaw in the forest to being a slave trader.
We'll get to that, but just worth noting that you have him agreeing to stay with her. I just want to make sure that's it's important. He says, he even says, you are mine. In the room, let me see you. Go in. I must fetch fir roots for fuel. Warm shall be the fire, and bright shall it shine. You shall sit softly and never be a cold. And then, immediately a woman comes by, an
Yeah.
older woman, and it turns out to be the troll wife,
Yeah.
the woman he was gonna bed, and she has a fucking kid with her, and she's like,
Yeah.
I know it's not been that long, but troll biology, man, this is your son. I don't know,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to
It's
do
like
something with
you
this.
created him in your head. You didn't even need to
Yeah.
touch me.
This desperate hag with a pig nose and a tattered green dress shows up with this bizarre, grotesque lump of a being and is like, this is your son, by the way. So you can ignore me all you want, but this here is troll country, and I'm going to sit outside of your window every night while you fuck your new wife.
No, I fucking hate it when that happens. It's the worst.
I kind of like it when that happens.
But if
I'm kind of into that shit. Yeah, the troll. She says that I'll lose my troll snout if you love me, but honestly, like that's the reason.
Yeah. All trolls are two things. Like there's always sort of the illusory troll and then the real thing. There's always the stone troll in the morning and then the living being at night. They ride a steed, but the steed is a big pig, you know.
Yeah.
Everybody is always flipping back and forth between two different images, in the same way that Gynt is always telling new lies about himself and who he is and who he was and what he believes. And so he says, well, I can't bear to be back with this pig-nosed woman, and I don't really want to have this ugly child. And I can't stand the guilt with Solveig from what I've done, the way I've betrayed her already, just as my life is settling down to exactly the thing that I want. So I'm just going to leave, and I can't leave without getting arrested. So I'm going to do what so many Norwegians did in the 19th century and go to America.
Yep. And he literally says, be patient, my girl, be my way long or short. You must wait. And she says, yes, I'll wait.
Forever.
She does.
God. God,
Yeah.
and it's wrenching for that reason, and then you go directly into like the last place that he goes before he goes to America
is to watch his mom die.
Yes, yeah, literally, because these, as we mentioned before, she's had all of her stuff like repossessed. She's living on the dole now, and she's just got like her bed and a cat, and he's like, okay, like. That thing that we used to do, like when I was a child, like we used to like get in the bed and pretend it was like a sledge or whatever, and like we're gonna do that one last time.
He sits at the foot of the bed, driving it like a sleigh to the gates of heaven to meet Saint Peter.
And he argues with Saint Peter in the story he makes up, and he's like, your boss will know better. Let me speak to the manager.
This scene gets me every time. It ruins me. I saw this at CSC in a horrible production directed by John Doyle, but Becky Ann Baker played his mom, and this scene, and Gabriel Ebert was Gynt. They were both perfectly cast, and this was just a beautiful, beautiful scene. And then there was so much more left of that production.
Yeah, because part of the charm, as we mentioned, is that you can read it like she wants to believe Pierre, or like she's just going along with it until she's like, nah, you're lying, but what matters right now is that he's there. What matters right now is that in the time that they have left, right, they can go wherever they like. They can be wherever they want. So, it renders sacred, in effect, his lies to her. She's going along with it because that's what matters is that her son is there, and if he takes her to the gates of heaven, so be it.
And I also think you have in this moment, and maybe it's just me, I don't know. You have a moment of, if Peer Gynt was instead of to thyself be enough, to thyself be everything, he's actually kind of being what he could be here, which is he's telling a story and he's using it in a beautiful way. Not in like this grand deceptive, not to make himself, but actually to uplift his mother. And to like, he's actually being this sweet caretaker. And then when someone else comes in, he knows how to communicate. He's actually able to be serious. So you actually have this moment of like, oh, this is the Gynt that like could have been. This is the guy that there could have been, that could have existed. He could have been this weird, fanciful guy with a lot of charisma that tells tales, and they're like, oh, it's that guy. But he has to take it to the absolute most fucking extreme. And he has this one moment that, when I'm picturing it, most of his serious lines, at least till the end, are delivered to me very dramatically and very self-importantly. But he has just this, see mother buried with honor. I must try and fare forth from here. Someone says, are you faring far? Seaward. And she says, so far. And he says, aye. And further still. And then the scene notes just say, he goes.
Yep.
and that's the end of the act.
And then we don't see him for like 40 years. Like,
Yeah.
it's so much time back. I guess I didn't say this before, but this play starts in like 1800 and ends in the present day. Peer Gynt is 20 at the beginning, and then the present day for when this was written, he would be like almost 90 years old at the end of this play.
So there's like there's a decades long period here where we don't know what Gynt is doing aside from his brief summary. Someone wants to write the adventures of Peer Gynt, they can, but he's definitely doing some real fucked shit. So I don't know if you want, it's not gonna be charming, because the next time we see him, he is chilling with Mr. Cotton, Monsieur Balloon, and Herr von Urbancroft in her trumpet straw. I mean, and he's just like sipping tea at a palm grove in Morocco. And he's got like a yacht, and he's talking about how he's lived his life and is planning this plot from way earlier where he said, I'll be Kaiser of all things, and then gets called a drunk. He's like, it's still an insane theory, as rich as he is at this time, but it's like become closer. And he has this idea of, with gold, with my money, with my cash, I will become Kaiser of all things, that it's within his grasp. And he's like selling these other rich people on it, or at least so he thinks.
Yeah, he's literally, the stage direction here is lights a cigar, and then he goes into his whole story like, dear friends, just think of my career in general. In what case came I to the West? A poor young fellow, empty-handed. I had to battle sore for bread. Trust me, I often found it hard. But life, my friends, life is dear, and as the phrase goes, death is bitter. Well, luck, you see, was kind to me. As the phrase, he says a lot of quotations that are like, from the scripture, that are not in the scripture, for example.
They're very incorrect quotations of the scripture.
That is a cool thing to do.
There's one where he says, it says in the scripture that
time is money.
That pride always stumbles. Not quite. He has this other great point where he's saying, this is how I was able to like forge my own like philosophy of existence. And he says, it is because I've never wed. Yes, gentlemen, the matter's clear past cavil. What ought man to be? Himself. That's my short answer here. His sole thought should be his and he. Wow, with the pronouns. But can it, if where'er he goes, he's humping other people's woes? You do not care. You're in this liberal age with telecommunication, news, greater education than you've ever had before at any point in history in Europe for people who are not of an aristocratic class. And he says, you gotta keep on the grind. You got to look at your business. You got to keep care of yourself. And you're going to become aware of all the ills and all of the sins of the world. And you can't do anything about that, man. So you just got to stop thinking about it, or it'll kill you.
And you can do something to alleviate that guilt that then makes you, he says, yeah, of course I did the slave trade. And then I had, a good plantation. And I don't know quite what he's talking about with selling idols to China, but then he's like, oh, and I funded missionaries too, whatever. Yeah. And they say at a profit. And he says, certainly.
Well, Norway's so Lutheran that like I think this would be seen as equally obscene as the slave trade that he's engaging in. This is that he's delivering Buddhas to China, but he's like, but I'm evening it out by also delivering missionaries and Bibles.
Yeah, he's also like laying the groundwork for like USAID, like CIA collaboration or some shit, like some blowback season 0 about Peer Gynt.
Like Peer Gynt funding like militias in Syria that are fighting Peer Gynt funded militias in like
on both sides. That's the vision he has, though.
Yeah,
that's
him with Turkey and Greece. He's like, yeah, I'll fund you guys, but like I'm gonna join the Turks because you guys are all gonna die. Like you just gotta be realistic about this.
Which is in conversation with, that's something that Lord Byron did. Like he went over there to like fight in the Greek Revolution at the time.
Okay.
Like
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, no, that's shit that people just like did as a hobby.
You want to be chivalric, you want to be a hero, and if you don't have your own war to do, well, you got to find someone else's.
I'm gonna go over there and speak ancient Greek to modern day Greeks and not be understood.
And it's interesting too that this is, Gynt is able to be seen as this vision as absurd, even as this incredibly wealthy guy, no matter how wealthy you're imagining him, right? We don't know if he's a little wealthy, a lot, whatever he is. It's hard. Now that he's in this world that is global, despite being, pre, electronics and all that,
Yeah.
pre-flight, the vision of what it is to rule the world is so much bigger. There is not too long before, a century or two before, that ruling the world is actually an attainable goal in your brain. It's an insane goal in the sense that any kind of political power is insane. But like you could, in your lifetime, go from being a lesser Scottish princeling who is sort of not a bastard, but kind of considered on the outside, to Lord of all three Isles. Again,
Yeah.
English Civil War. Been thinking about it. I like that. This is the kind of stuff that happens. You could be master of all you see, but the thing is, all you see now for the first time is so much stuff, and you're seeing, realistic images of it and genuine maps of it, and you're seeing people from all these places and capital and all of that, and he's suddenly like, he has this vision and he's like, no, I'm just gonna do it, like, and it's and it shows kind of how absurd he is. But if you want to get too political with it, he's also the merchant class at this time that's like, let's fucking do it. It's all ours. Like, this is the moment. We've obviously had this power sharing agreement for a while with feudal lords. Fuck it. This is everything.
Yeah.
This is us now.
And just that Norwegian character of like, yeah, I'm participating in the transatlantic trade. Maybe I'm not doing the slave trade. I can opt out of it, right?
Yeah.
I do enough. I give to charity, but you can't opt out. You are in the same system. You are locked in between all the other cogs, making all of it happen. And as a result, you're very uncomfortable with this. So you're going to find whatever you can. You're going to retreat back to your old stories, or you're going to retreat back to your church. You're going to read, not to gulp it all, but to choose the bits of it that one can use in your Bible or in your literature or in your history.
Yeah, one of his friends is literally Mr. Cotton. Like, it's not exactly right. But it also goes poorly for him because things are not going to go well for him. His friends, because he's like so openly malicious and so openly, oh no, I'm siding with the Turks, fuck y'all, I don't care if y'all die. They just ditch him in the middle of the desert.
They just steal his boat. And his boat, of course, has all of his money on it. And as they're sailing away, and it is a steamship, it's not your Norwegian sailing ship, he starts praying to God, and he's like, and he's not praying for vengeance either. Vengeance is what he gets, but he's like, just please bring them back. Like, I just need something. I'm just on the coast of Morocco here with nothing. Soon he's going to be like, surrounded by monkeys that are throwing shit at him.
No, he literally decides to join the monkeys because he doesn't have a better idea.
And he's like, wow, I wish I kept that tail. Then the boat explodes and everyone on it dies. And he's like, well, that feels pretty good. Oh no, my money.
Imagine just like little like gold coins flapping in the air.
He's like, thanks God, I guess, but like, couldn't you have just done the peaceful thing instead?
Yeah, like, I'm just gonna wander into the desert, and what am I now? I'm impoverished. Like, oh, I guess I'll be a prophet?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the description?
Before he does that, though, he replays the scene from earlier when he's getting beaten up by the monkeys.
Yeah.
He says the little ones are even worse. He literally goes through the same thing with the trolls. So the same cycle of like, he has a victory and then a massive failure happens to him again. And in like an increasingly absurd way, as if the trolls weren't absurd enough, because like, this is what he's like branded himself to be. This is who he becomes, whatever little victory he has.
Well,
and so now he starts building again.
Yeah, and like, that's the thing. Like, he's so caught up in the he's so caught up in rehashing the fantasy that was like all of Act 2, like on both sides of it, right? Because he's talking to the princess, I guess, Anitra at one point, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna save your soul, I'm gonna convert you to my religion, but I haven't a soul. Then of course you must get one, which is the same exchange as well, but I haven't a tail, right?
Right. And he always says, and starting in Act 4, really, he says this thing: you always have to go forward or back, but never side to side. Never walk like a crab, right? Of course, how's the way you get around the Boyg? You go to the side. He never does that. It's always it's like those two Dr. Seuss characters that are walking in opposite directions, and they meet in the middle and they don't move.
The Zacks, yes.
Yeah. So he's always got a fucking plan. And he knows how to grind, and he talks about, he learned his work ethic from Protestants England. He learned things from the Americans. He learned things from the French, from the Portuguese, from the Jews. He has learned from everybody that he encounters on how to get ahead in life. And so now he has this like harem of women out in the desert where he is pretending to be some new prophet.
Oh yeah.
Just as so many Europeans are making hay out of the desert and out of Africa in general to create wealth and to create bizarre new little worlds for themselves.
Oh yeah, literally. He has this long monologue where he's like, well, my business life is a finished chapter. My love sports too are a cast-off garment. I feel no desire to live back like a crab. Yeah, the forward and back, as you say. What if, as a traveling scientist, I should study past ages and time's veracity? And then he goes into like the whole scientific talk. Like we mentioned Lovecraft earlier, but I have a note here that's like he's like a scuffed Nyarlathotep, right? He's an agent of chaos who isn't actually in control, right?
Yeah.
But who, unlike
he's there.
yeah, he's there, and the things he sets in motion, he can't stop.
And also, I think there's something interesting in the fact that like he is able to kind of keep making it happen, right? Like he happens to find in the desert these lost jewels and in sword and cloak, and it's funny, of course, and it's comedic, and it's meant to be so, But also at the same time, like there's something too, just like this guy's life just keeps on going and keeps on happening, and it works for him. And I think it once again, and this might be me over putting myself into it, but it's 200 years. It's not going to offend Ibsen if I'm wrong. He won't know. It's also something
on the contrary.
God, I wish Ibsen comes
out of his grave.
But how sick would that be? But it's also something to like the class that like Ibsen's own family was from, right? Yeah. They come from this place where they're not allowed to fail because it shames everyone around them. And they come from like, Norwegian society at the time was so rigid, right? Not that they weren't becoming capitalist, because like, his families were merchants, but they saw it in a very feudal sense. They had a very aristocratic sense of where you were in the society. Even if you were a capitalist, you were born into being a capitalist. And I find it interesting that his own family failed at that repeatedly and were repeatedly bailed out his whole life. And whether this is on purpose or on accident, the connection is something that like immediately struck me. I'm like, wow, there's gonna be something to get this guy to the next thing so he can go on exploiting everybody. Because like if one of these women that he goes and like turns into his harem, they had some kind of grand failure. They're not finding jewels in the desert. They just die. The sailors later on just die when the ship sinks. They don't find some special thing. Like everyone around him, like whatever happened to the woman that he just stole at the beginning, ran off with, she presumably just gets her life ruined. She doesn't have an experience with trolls. Like he gets chance after chance after chance on account of just who he is and who he represents.
Exactly. Which is like, and it's part of the humor, to see him just kind of fail upward or fail
forward,
it's
hilarious,
right? Like, because he's such a dilettante that like when he runs into the Sphinx, right, and it's like "Wer bist du?" and he's like, "Oh, you're very fluent in German." It's like, yeah, you're fluent in German because of that elementary question you asked. Fuck off.
Yeah. Well, and of course, Egypt is swarming with krauts at this time that the play is written. So he's making this comment of like, you have this long-standing, mysterious, historical symbol of what Egypt is, and even that has been sullied by Germans.
It's like of the Berlin dialect, taking note.
Because it's like a specific dialect.
He knows.
It's like, oh yeah, like fucking.
So he goes on with this, like I said, he has the prophet thing. Do either of you have anything that really stands out about the prophet thing, or is it just sort of another step on his?
Well, with the prophet
journey
thing, he has this woman, Anitra. She's the one that he really loves. He has these other women around, but he wants her and he can't get her.
Right.
So he starts to do the same thing that he did earlier, where he offers that silver button, but he has so many more riches now. He has this opal on his turban that he hands off, and he's handing off his rings and his bangles, and he's like, "Fuck it, I'll put on your clothes, you put on my clothes." And she's on his white steed that God presumably gave him out of nowhere in the middle of the desert, and she's just like, "No, I have enough," and she runs off. Like mostly nude but covered in gold, and he is like, okay, he takes off his Turkish clothes or his Arabic clothes, and he's like, I'm leaving the Turk behind, and he's also wearing his Norwegian clothes underneath.
He just had it the whole time. He just like rips it off, and it's
and so he's like,
Superman style, yeah.
And he refers to Anitra as his nightingale. Again, women as birds, birds as women.
Mm-hmm.
Why exactly? I don't know, but it keeps happening.
Because they fly away from him. I don't know. Anitra spinoff story win. Who knows where she goes? Interesting little.
She needs her little Huckleberry Finn thing.
Yeah,
Who
she
knows?
needs her own like Wide Sargasso Sea versus Jane Eyre.
But yeah,
there was a literary
work.
tradition of responding to Ibsen at the time. There was an author. She was 19 years old when she published this, but she wrote Bran's Daughter, which I don't think has been translated into English, but it was a big thing, and it actually endeared that author to Ibsen and his wife, and they were very good friends. And then she had some issues with her husband that then became a dollhouse. He wrote all of that into that play, and she was like, we're not friends anymore.
Dang.
Wow.
This is, the authors respond very differently to fan fiction, I guess. Yeah. But
turned her life into content.
Exactly right. So we said this whole thing with the Sphinx happens because he fancies he's going to be something between a scientist and a historian. He doesn't even know, because he's just getting history books and going to a place where history happens. And he's like, I'm going to figure it out. And it's like, well, you're reading history that already is like written down. So this is nothing new. Like, he thinks he's the first guy to talk to the Sphinx. It's and this is where he meets and becomes king of the madhouse. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't have anything on this. I don't know what's happening here.
Just two of the three productions I have seen of this show did not even keep any part of this.
Really?
Sure. I mean, I can see why.
I actually love it. Having like read through it in full now, I was like, oh no, I would keep this. This German behind the Sphinx is like, I know who you are. And he starts getting like meta. He starts analyzing Peer Gynt, but like as a work of literature. He's like, oh, what's the next thing going to happen for our beloved character? And it feels like Ibsen maybe responding to people responding to Brand. And writing that into the story. And it's the first of two times he's going to get really meta with it.
Yeah. The other one's even more like,
Well, because the insane like minister guy Hussein that he meets, he's literally like, yeah, I'm a pen, and Pierre's like, well, I'm a blank sheet of paper that no one will write on, and
then Hussein's like, and let me get you some ink, and he cuts his throat off.
Yes, I love that. His
own throat, I should say. Like,
which is great. I just don't know what to even. I
don't know what's happening. Like, Gynt gets dragged into this asylum by this guy who's like, you're supposed to be the emperor of Egypt. You're supposed to. He's a European meeting another European in Cairo. They think that they're supposed to be on the top of the world here. They will be greeted as gods, as liberators.
It's worth noting Egyptology was like the thing right now. Like, it was so cool. Just to be an Egyptologist. And they also all were like drawing the Egyptians as white and very much saw them as an early European society for some fucking reason. I'm sorry, I cut you off, but it's worth noting.
And like Dickens even wrote that into like Edwin Drood. That's where Drood is going to be going off to, so he can exploit the natural resources. And so Gynt is dragged into this courtyard where he's supposed to be declared king or emperor or Kaiser or whatever. And it's the courtyard of some old broken down asylum. And the guy just locks him in a cell and throws the key down a well.
Yeah.
It happens in one stage direction. It's so fast that he's just like, wait, what? And it's because he has become the king of the self. And this guy's like, you see, the world, reason, the god of reason died last night at 11 p.m. exactly on the dot. And all of the crazy people, including you, Peer Gynt, who I somehow knew before you came to me, we're all supposed to be in charge now, which means we have to stay here in this asylum and be as sequestered as possible. Be the self, be the individual, have no connection. Again, be to only to thyself, be true. Only to thyself. It will never follow as the night, the day, that you canst not then be false to any man. The other man does not matter. You must simply draw within, and that will be the whole of your life. And it is the same as being locked up in a cell against your will.
Exactly right. And he's there for an indeterminate amount of time, because when we next see him, he's old.
Yeah. Like, we don't see him escape. They go on this whole tangent about Darwin too, about monkeys and like who used to rule the land. That guy cuts his own throat, and they cheer long live self's emperor, and then they cheer long live Peer Gynt in German. and that's the end of the act. And then we cut to this man as like an 88-year-old man on a boat. And there's never any point, you know, with this act, it began with him being like, and then I went to Charleston and I worked in the slave trade and I had a boat and everything. And here it's just like, nope, no, he's just back in Norway now.
And he's a guy who's back in Norway
happened to him.
Yeah, he's not rich, but he's like able to, you know, get a boat to take him to Norway, and like has enough that he can offer stuff to the crew, but we don't know what he's done in between.
He meets a guy at one point who like wants to like watch him drown and then like cut him open to like learn about like dreams or whatever
that he might be imagining, because the other guy said, "Oh, that was the ship's dog."
Yeah, which like I'm not sure
it's off the rails at this point.
I'm not sure what to make of it. Like it seems to me like the logical conclusion of his own rudderlessness, right? I mean, because he's already induced somebody else quite by accident to cut his own throat because he committed to the bit too hard, right? But like when you're
always be doing the bit.
Yeah. Exactly. And when you're just like rolling through life, you know, depending on like weird shit to just kind of play out your way, like you're at the mercy of somebody weirder than you are, right? Who is waiting around like, oh, well, I'm just gonna, you know, I don't know what the connection is between like drowning him and like and like seeing what human dreams are going to be like. I wonder if I can find it.
He's a character that almost is totally symbolic, where you could be like, oh, he's the Grim Reaper, but then Henrik Ibsen lets him talk too much that he's not that, because he talks about very not normal but very human things. He's like, oh yes, I'm a scientist, I want to pull your body apart for research. Once you're gonna die in the crash in just a few minutes, we're all gonna wreck, and I'd like to have your body so I can take your organs out and take a look at what makes you you.
Yeah. What I specially seek is the center of dreams, and with critical care I look into your seams.
And this is also a parallel of Gynt earlier with that girl when he has his harem, saying, oh, I need to measure the lumps on your skull. Because I think you'd be really good at getting an education.
Yeah, doing a little phrenology, phrenology.
What goes around in his fantasies comes around.
Yeah.
And whatever this guy is, he represents just like wanting to take Peer Gynt apart, the like fleshy parts of him. And that's not the last person that's going to want to take Peer Gynt apart. And there's a crash. The cook is even like, let me live. And Peer Gynt's like kicking him off the boat.
It's the Titanic moment, but a lot meaner.
I was just thinking of that.
Yeah, it only has room for one of them, except I guess the pale guy is light enough because he's skinny or something. But
skinny or a ghost or but in like his brain.
Yeah, you could imagine maybe the cook is a bigger guy and Gynt is like, no, you're gonna sink us or whatever. There's a point too where they pass by this other wreck and Pier is so shocked that they're not going to help them. It's like the storm is too big, the lifeboat will just sink. And he goes on this whole thing. I never would have done that. If I were a younger man, I'd be down there helping them. Which of course, like, no, you wouldn't. That's never been you. I know you. I've been living with you for 4 acts already.
Yeah. It's been a while, Pierre. Yeah, exactly. He gets to go home. And he has like a very like end of the Hobbit moment where people are like auctioning off his old house. I don't know why they waited till now to do it. It's been a long time. No one's been there.
Well, the implication seems to be that after his mother died and he left, the smith moved in with his wife.
Right.
And we never see his wife. And his wife is the one who is dead now. And now they're auctioning off the stuff, including like, Pier's ladle and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And he gets to hear people talk about Peer Gynt, this guy who lived a long time ago, and people kind of joking about him. And he almost has like we talked about, Dickens earlier has like a Scrooge seeing after he's dead moment. It's not literally because he's not quite dead. And he sees even a funeral. He sees a funeral where like this guy's talking about this other guy, and he was like, and this person was true to himself. He was his actual self. And that self was actually not the best guy. He was a guy who was kind of cowardly. He was a guy who didn't want to serve his country.
Cut off his finger to avoid fighting in the war.
Exactly. But and he was not impressive. He kind of shuffled into church, but you know what? He had his farm, he had his family, he did what he was good at, and he was master of that farm. He was Kaiser of that farm, as Pierre might put it.
He took care of He took care of his sons who went off to America.
Yes, as they all do.
Norway was second only to Ireland in terms of number of people who left the country.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Exports. Oh yeah, some of them went to Minnesota and eventually resulted in my father.
Yeah, there you go. Are you maybe part troll?
I could very well be. I've
That
lived on
would
the
be.
internet long enough.
I did say, I think I texted Lenore. I was like, they want him to be a troll in the troll sense, but he is a troll in the internet sense a lot of the time.
Literally.
For
Like,
sure.
yeah, he's just
A
trolling,
troll before his time, a troll for all seasons, truly.
no
Yeah,
doubt.
he would absolutely be a blue check, replying to every tweet. Be like, this happened to me. I touched myself to this. Yeah.
Ibsen
This happened to my buddy
Cybersmith.
Eric. You think he's a fucking yes, he's Cybersmith. Pure Gynt. Imagine that. Imagine that recreation. Yeah, no, yeah. You think he's a robot like that, but he's the amount he's posting. But no, it's
the
just
human Boyg guy.
Yeah, human boy.
Oh my
That
god.
might be the title of this episode.
The human Boyg guy. Yes, there we go.
No one understands what it means, but it's okay.
Yeah. And they roll up with the funeral. Like that's the end of the ditty. It's over and done. R.I.P. AJ.
Oh, there you go. Haha. So at this point, he's like, "Well, what do I do? What? I'm old. I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have any fucking money." What he did have blew up on that ship for the second time in his life.
Yeah,
a ship,
and it was
literally
way
gone
less.
down.
It was way less. It was like enough to maybe get a house in the Norwegian countryside and live out the last 5 years of your life. Like,
yeah, and now he doesn't even have that.
Yeah,
but there is still that house with the antlers, and you still have Solveig out there, literally just waiting for Pier to come back.
Yeah,
and there's that Shrek reference there, and when he's peeling the onion.
Yeah, he says, "I am an onion."
Yeah, there lies the outermost layer all torn. That's the shipwrecked man. Here's the passenger layer.
It's one way of reading it.
Yeah, this starts to become, we all know the term everyman. That actually comes from a medieval play.
Okay.
There's a play called Everyman that's about a guy named Everyman. These are not very sophisticated pieces of theater, let me tell you. So Everyman is at the end of his life, and he's meeting all of these different representations of like his sins and his virtues and family, all the values that you want a good Catholic medieval European to have. This story has been adapted a number of different times. You see it for The Ghost of Christmas Future. You see it here in Act 5 of Peer Gynt. You see it in the Jack Chick tract, This Was Your Life.
Yes.
They contrast, the sinful guy and the Christian guy, and he's sitting there nude watching his whole life play out before him before he gets to go to heaven or hell. And this is what oddly, it's also kind of how the Oresteia ends as well, with Orestes meeting with the Furies, who then become a jury that conclude whether his killing of his mother was justified or not. And so here we have, again, Ibsen doesn't let it just be that. He lets it be a little bit weirder. Like when Gynt is hanging out with the townspeople, they're so happy that they were able to buy his ladle. These little kids, all the kids know who he is. All of the people of this town who hated him, they're all telling his stories, and they're telling stories of things you haven't heard of that probably didn't happen. And some people seem to like him, and they say that they're related to him, and they never would have said that before.
They're discussing Gynt lore.
Yeah. Like no matter how much of him, no matter how much he was the way that he was, he was indelible. He couldn't totally leave them behind because his stories lingered, even though they weren't even his own stories.
He's just the worst guy, but like he managed to make an impression. He managed to be something.
Yeah, he left his name on these things, whether or not they were of him originally.
Yeah. People are like, "Oh yeah, Gynt, I hate you." 30 years later, your kid is like 9 years old, and you're like, "Hey, did you ever hear about that guy who lived up there by the mill? He rode a reindeer off of a cliff."
Exasperated, like Star Wars mother asking her kid, "Well, were you Anakin or Obi-Wan or Peer Gynt?"
Yes. There we go. That's a Matthew Stover reference right there. Very nice. Return of the Sith novelization. Someone was just messaging us that we need to do the rest of the Star Wars novelizations, and I was like, I don't think so.
They get less interesting. I read the Attack of the Clones novelization, and it was fine.
Revenge of the Sith was pretty good, but the other ones, whatever. But that's Stover's only contribution. Stover was wild, but that's the whole thing. He followed us on Twitter before we were deleted. But anyway,
man,
once again, not really relevant, but worth It's funny to me. Okay, so the button molder shows up, and it is this moment, like you said, Ghost of Christmas Future,
Yeah.
Every Man, and I like
Meeting
this.
the devil at the crossroads.
Exactly,
But
literally at the
not the
crossroads,
devil. He can't be the devil because it's got to be weirder than that.
because the devil's another guy.
Yeah.
He asks him who he is, and then he says, "Your name doesn't chance to be Pierre," and Pierre says, "Peer Gynt," as the saying is, which
As
that's
the
not a saying, that's just your name. And he says, "That I call luck. It is precisely Peer Gynt I'm sent for tonight." And he says, "See here, I must mold buttons, and you must go into my ladle." And at that point, I imagine him pulling out just a fucking gigantic human-sized ladle. It says at the beginning he has a large casting ladle, which undersells how big that shit would have to be. But and he says, "What to do there? To be melted up. To be melted." And the button maker, "Here it is, empty and scoured. Your grave is dug ready, your coffin bespoke. The worms in your body will live at their ease. But I have orders without delay on master's behalf to fetch your soul." And then they kind of have this back and forth, this Grim Reaper talk here. And he's going to turn him into he's basically in the way that he as a child would take that metal and make buttons.
Yeah.
He is going to take the material of Peer Gynt, because he says Peer Gynt was not bad enough for the fires of hell. He was certainly not good enough to go to heaven. And he is just going to take the bits that make him up and turn it into a new human, mix him up with some other people. Yep. And Peer Gynt cannot abide this shit. He'd fucking lose his mind. He'd prefer to go to hell.
This is the new way of living. You are no longer able to be virtuous. You can't opt out of the system, but you can't opt in enough to take responsibility either. Everything is delegated out. So what's left for you to do? Well, you will become a consumer product. You will become a mass-produced good, indistinguishable from all the others, and probably put in a tin of Danish cookies that your mom keeps in a cupboard somewhere.
Your button, your raw material, because he literally says that he meets the devil a little later on. And the devil is like, "Yeah, no," he was like, "Yeah, we're having a hard time." He's like, "Because everyone's better," and he's like, "Well, no, everyone's worse, but like kind of in a boring way, and everyone's getting turned into fucking buttons." Like, this did The Good Place like 200 years before that, like maybe it influenced it, maybe not. It's cool to imagine, but it's doing the thing where it's like, well, Pierre is part of the system, yeah, and he's traded slaves. I would certainly be okay sending Pierre to hell, but that said, he's was Pierre ever the guy that individually did the thing? He called someone to slit his throat, but that guy was doing the thing near him. He was being crazy. Like, it's all the things he's done in his life. It's just not enough to be anything. And also, he was not himself. He was not a unique individual. I mean, obviously he's a unique individual, but because he was so self-obsessed, and because the self that he is just this amalgamation of stories, and he had a life as a prophet, he had a life as a scientist, quote unquote, he had a life as a merchant, he had all these different things, and none of them were really him, and he was really willing to discard them as quickly as he discarded those clothes in the desert. Then what is there to do but just take the raw material and start over?
Once the connection between, the stage direction of him drawing his finger across his throat to symbolize seriousness, and then when the callback to it being Hussein cutting his own throat, and then the world just chugs right along, and what's made of that? Nothing. What's made of this guy dying partly at Gynt's accidental behest? Nothing, he's not saying anything profound. He's not defining who he is. He's subsumed into this into this paradigm of nothing ever happening, because there's no way to distinguish himself.
Yeah, and he just sees just before meeting the button maker, he was out in this pine barren where there used to be woods. They all burned down, and he's being followed by balls of thread and withered leaves that are like, "We are the choices you never made. We're the words you never spoke." So he's haunted by the ghosts of literally nothing, just shit he did not do. And now that the button maker has talked to him, the button molder, he has to go around and find the people from his life that are still alive and say, "Okay, you got to make the case for or against me. Do one or the other. Either one. I'm fine with either one. Just speak honestly, but in such a way that I don't become a button."
And there is kind of a funny bit here where the button molder's like, okay, next crossroads.
Yeah.
And he gets like 3 crossroads of like,
he gets so many he always gets more chances.
Yeah, over and over and over. And the first guy he meets is it's called the old man, but it's the troll king from before. And he was like, I didn't want to be a troll. I didn't let you cut my eyes out or whatever. And he's like, yeah, but you adopted the troll moniker. You ran with being, to thine self only be true. You lived your life that way. You were fully willing to do all that to sell yourself out. No, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to perjure myself. And then the troll drops some lore about being like overthrown and like Pier's children are like running the world. I don't know if that's like some reference I might not know, or if that's maybe Ibsen being like, fuck Norwegian, this certain type of Norwegian person. They all come from Peer Gynt. All my ops are Peer Gynt children. I don't know. But
it feels like it's just talking about like this sort of way of being, this way of understanding the world dying out. In a way that's like merging with us instead of simply disappearing
and being forced to, the station that you perhaps occupied if you were a troll king, if you were in fantasy, or if you were in this previous paradigm. Now it's consigned to history. Now it's consigned to theater, right? Which is exactly where the old man is going, right? The papers are clamming for national talents in the theater. And then
showbiz, baby.
Yes, Broadway is back and it's full of trolls. And that's this, and Peer does the like, I should write a book thing. Sic transit gloria mundi, like thus passes the wonder of the world.
Fantastic.
This is it's a weird long act, and it's very literary. And like, if you're doing this on stage, please cut this. That production I talked about earlier with Gabriel Ebert and Becky Ann Baker was so good, and they had cut it down to like an hour and 40 minutes, but for some reason kept like the entirety of Act 5 intact.
Wow.
I was like, you cut the eventful stuff and just left the button conversations.
You gotta have more of that button content. I'm telling you. I mean, someone will clamor for their buttons.
If you got all the button content, at least give him the giant ladle that Ibsen mentioned.
Yeah, right. Like someone even did a movie once. I was looking up movie adaptations. Someone did a movie that was just based on Act 5 of Peer Gynt. Like from the boat through the buttons and everything. I guess maybe if you throw in flashbacks, but that does not sound like fun to me. You have to earn it. You have to get all of the stuff there to earn the buttons. Otherwise, just trim it, shave it.
I know. I'm sorry. Seven Seal. Who's the director? Seven Seal.
Ingmar Bergman. He did a full production with all of the lines of text. Again, another thing I would not necessarily advise.
Sure. But he was interested in this play, and you can definitely see that in his work.
And there is a full production that's done near Lillehammer like every summer. It's like a cultural.
Makes sense.
It's one of those things that you just like the Passion Play at Oberammergau. It's just like one of those things that you do. There used to be the production of Oklahoma that they did outside of Tulsa.
Sure.
It's like, we're the Oklahoma. It's like, this is the Peer Gynt. This is the one we do every word. It's very prestigious. It's outdoors. There's a lake in the background. We use the water and the grass and everything. But for every other director in the universe, please cut it, because that's where the true joy of this thing is that it's neither the button on your cap nor the sole of your shoe. This play can be molded in so many different ways by its director and by its cast to tell a number of different stories or have a number of different focal points thematically.
Almost like when you're the director, you need to thyself be true. I don't know, to actually do your own thing, not just be the Peer Gynt, just be the static, non-changing thing.
Not be a sheet of paper for other people to write on
or bleed on potentially. So he then meets the lean one. It's similar to the other one. Like I said, very literary. We don't have to go overdo it, but that's the devil. And the devil is like fucking tired out. He has met too many Johnnies down in Georgia who's kicked his ass. He's just had a bad time.
How can I hold all these fiddles?
Right. And he can't he just can't let he can't let Peer in unless Peer is like especially bad. And he's like, I did the slave trade. I sold idols. I let a guy die, whatever. And he's just like, everybody does that these days.
Yeah. And it's like, if you weren't going to do it, it didn't mean it wasn't going to happen. So I can't really even put the blame on you. Like it was just going to hash out the same way either way. You
And I
made
always
no
love-
impact on history.
Yeah, I love fictional adaptations of the double. Like, it's a thing that I've
Mhm.
always been a sucker for. Just seeing what people do with it. Usually, a lot of times it can be very lazy, but like when it's a
Yeah.
good, and this is just like, I mean, I don't think we need to see more of him because
Yeah.
like this is a great little place for him to be. But like just this like weird, lean, tired guy with a net over his shoulder.
Yeah.
And he's just like, and then he's like, well, who does go to hell? And he's like, well, photographs, right?
Well, and he's dressed
This
as a
newfangled thing.
he's dressed as a sexton though too, right? He's somebody to whom like Pierre's going to like shrive his soul to like have somebody
Sure.
to vouch for him,
Mhm.
And it's that it's that drive that, leads him to dig himself further in many cases.
Mhm.
But he says, like, the way photographs work, and you know how you got to do stuff with the negatives and whatnot. He was
Mhm.
like, you can do something with a negative, you can do something with a positive. What you can't do something with a smudged out picture, and that's all you are, Pierre Gynt, which is pretty fucking brutal.
It's great. It's so good.
hmm But it's interesting. He was like, I dunk them in sulfur and it fixes them right up, and it's a fascinating way of looking at it, and it's a fascinating way that Ibsen is playing with a not too old technology when he's
Mhm.
writing this.
These
this
guys,
is-
the realists, were always obsessed with new technology. Again, going back to Strindberg, his misogynist archenemy, the Dance of Death has them always playing around with this fucking ticker tape in the back where they're always getting telegrams, and he's always going to the back of the room and reading, oh, looks like the weather's gonna get bad, and the technology is such a key part of realist plays, and of course this isn't a realist play, but it's still the same obsession for Chekhov and Strindberg and Ibsen.
Exactly. And so he runs into the button molder in his base one more time, and he's like, look, you're gonna have to give me one more shot here. He's like, one more crossroads, and the button molder is like, oh my god, okay, whatever. Like, you can tell the button molder doesn't want to have to force this man into the button. He's tired, whatever.
That's not the job description. The job description is you get in the ladle and I set you on fire and watch you melt.
Yeah, no, earlier he says, like, what, I'll be melted up with John, Dick, and Harry. And he says, they were in there earlier. Yes. Like,
he's just doing a job.
Yeah.
I melted your dad. I melted your granddad. It's been a while since I melted them. Like,
yeah. And he then finally returns to Solveig because it's the last person he can go back to. It's the last person he has this genuine relationship with, who remembers him as him in some sense.
We've had brief, like 6-line cutaways to her, things that are, again, he wasn't planning on staging this. This isn't written theatrically. It's just like she's back at the hut while he's in Morocco, and then back to him with the monkeys, and and he walks by the hut once, and then that's when he realizes she's still alive, she's still doing things, and he hears Solveig's song, again, another Grieg composition, and he runs off. He can't face this, but now he realizes, here is the person that I was so horrible to. I ruined her life forever. She is still alone, pushing 85 years old, and she has nothing to show for it in her entire life. This is my ticket to hell. And instead, she damns him by not damning him.
Yep.
She
says, cry aloud my crime, and she says, and cry my sins and trespasses, and she says, to God be the praise, and not hast thou sinned, oh my own only boy. Thou hast made all my life as a beautiful song. Blessed be thou that at last thou hast come. Blessed, thrice blessed, our meeting. And he's just like, well, fuck.
Like, tell what thou knowest. Where was I as myself, as the whole man, the true man? Where was I with God's sigil upon my brow? And Solveig responds, in my faith, in my hope, and in my love. And it's like, if in your estimation you haven't lived a life worth that, that's just something that you have to live with. That's, you are everything to somebody. And, you know how far everything goes or doesn't go. So you just have to, accept that.
And he's faced with the overwhelming power of her love. And it circles back around where she fulfills this role of a mother in his life more than anything else.
Yeah.
And he gets to have his mommy back. And he sort of drifts off to sleep with her singing a lullaby, while the button man is like, well, I'll just see you at the next crossroad, Pierre, and then we'll Whatever.
And she calls him, I mean, she takes it too, 'cause she calls him boy multiple times. Dear
Yeah.
boy, dearest boy of mine. Like you said, she holds him. Um, I am interested in the we'll see whether I say no more. What does that mean,
Yeah.
you think? Is that like leaving open that maybe this button molder has been swayed one way or another? Or is it just the button molder saying, you know what, I'll let you have your moment?
This
Because
is
I kind of read it the second way.
yeah. I think yeah, I think it's a little bit of an fuck it and walking off, but it's a very Ibsen thing. It's Ibsen leaving you with this sort of half sentence, shrugging his shoulders. Brand is like off in the mountains and in the snow. His wife and child have died. He's lost everyone, and he's so dedicated to the Lord, and he calls out to God. He's like, "What is the purpose?" And then it just says a voice. Whose voice? We have no idea. It's like off stage. And it's just like, the greatest of these is love. And then he gets buried under an avalanche and dies. And
Rocks fall, everyone dies.
And like, a dollhouse. Nora is leaving. She's heading out the door. You hear that door close as her husband just says, like, well, if everything turns out better, slam,
There you
lights
go.
out.
Like
So
Cut to credits. Yeah.
the son may or may not have that lethal morphine dose.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it's Ibsen always ending everything he writes, all of his good work, at least. He just throws a little rock in your shoe.
Mhm.
And this has so many rocks to put in your shoe because the whole
Yes.
time you're just like, what the fuck? But this very last moment, he just wants you to feel unsettled. He wants you to feel like it's not over, right? Because this thing could very easily just be like, the healing power of love and of women who are there to heal us and only do that. And he
Mhm.
clearly does not believe that.
Right. I
So-
mean, like the button molder still says, I'll see you at the next crossroads.
Yeah.
And she says, if you want to read into these last lines, I will cradle thee, I will watch thee, sleep and dream thou, dear my boy. And it's worth noting the cradling and watching. Yes, he's physically here. She's been doing that her entire life, though.
Mhm.
And sleep and dream, like what has he been doing but dreaming his entire life?
Yeah.
But both literally, if you want to read it as, the dream of Peer Gynt hitting his head, but also just like making up shit. Like that's what all he's done is sleep and dream. All he's done is just cook stuff up. So it actually ends on like, he's gonna keep doing his thing, and he's found another mom to like cry on for a little while. But this doesn't end. It maybe is a nice moment for Pierre before he gets turned into a button. But like in my reading, his ass is going in the ladle. You know what I mean? I want to. It's like like fuck it. That's the fuck it. You're going in the ladle.
Sir, please step into the ladle.
Yeah, exactly. So that's and I guess you can have another reading, and that's fine too. You know what is what it is. But I find it to be a really cool ending. And just the whole thing, like I don't know what to make of. Like you've listened to me talk about it. I don't know what to make of all of this, but it's really neat. There's a lot of just Ibsen's things he's interested in. He's just throwing at the wall. He's like, well, I want to go here. I want to go there. I'm going to do all of it. I have the power to do all of it. He's a writer who for the first time feels like he has a little freedom outside of just trying to have someone pay attention to him.
Yeah.
And you have this just weird blend that, maybe doesn't even always work perfectly. It certainly wouldn't work, like you said, work perfectly to be staged, not even intended to be, but it is just as a whole, this really phenomenal thing that I'm definitely gonna just be like turning around in my head a lot. Like these little moments, like the Boyg and like shit like in the asylum and like stuff that I'm like, well, what the hell even is that? But it's like I think good works leave, like you said, rock in your shoe. Another way, when Josh was on the show, I think he described a few concepts from American War as marbles that just kind of rattle around in his head sometimes, no matter how long ago you read it. And I really do. I mean, I only just finished the book, but I feel like this is something that is going to rattle around in my head a bit, in a good way. I don't know. What are y'all's thoughts as we kind of come to the end of this?
Well, that's exactly what it was for me. Like, that's why I always see a production of this when I can go see it. This is why I'm always like going back to read a new translation of it. I just, that's why I tried to adapt it once. AJ did successfully adapt it, and I was a dramaturg briefly at the beginning of that project.
Very cool.
But like I also worked on my own adaptation, but I don't write. I'm not a writer, and it's never gonna be complete, and that's cool. but like it just it there's a playwright that I really like who briefly taught at my alma mater. He's the Hungarian national playwright of Romania. So that's
There you go.
okay. His name's Andras Fishki, and Andras talks about, he's a very devout Christian, and in this very Hungarian Romanian way. And he talks about how a play needs to, for him, theologically, he believes that every play needs to create a situation where your audience is desperate for a savior, and then you don't provide it, because that makes your play into an idol. A good example of doing this not in a Christian way, but in a different way, is like, I saw the TV Glow. That's how Jane Schoenbrunn designed their movie to be like, make people really long for this one outcome. You know what it is. You're screaming for it by the end. And I'm not going to give it to you because you got to do it. You got to go do it yourself.
Right.
And I think that's what Ibsen is playing around with. And this is why he's able to revolutionize drama after this point, when he has this status and he's able to write Dollhouse and Hedda Gabler and everything, is that he is so clearly frustrated, and on a theological level, right? This is an extremely Lutheran country. You cannot be legally declared an adult unless you are confirmed in the Lutheran Church at age 15. Oslo was called what, Christiania or whatever.
Yeah.
Every man's middle name is Christian.
Right.
Like with Brand, he has this character who says, your God is dead. I've come here to bury him and preach the real God. And he builds this cabin under a glacier and lives very austerely. And he praises that austerity again with the priest at the end of this, the men in black that the trolls are so afraid of. And he's so frustrated with religion. He's so frustrated with everything else. And he just wants to make everyone else as frustrated as he is.
Right.
And to say, look at yourselves. What are we supposed to be doing here? I don't have an answer.
Yeah, because we live in a world where a sufficiently ambitious drunkard and liar and layabouts can go from causing trouble in his village to being a globe-trotting slave trader, right? To shaping the religious landscape of China, right? And again, whose ambitions and whose lies upend lives, upend civilizations, dudes cut their throats at his feet. And in a world where such people exist and can still go home to have somebody at least sing them a lullaby at the end of their long, sordid life, you have to go out and be willing to, not necessarily be the strange passenger who cuts him open, but just to be a motive force acting against such things, right? To figure out who you are and what you're doing, and blaze any kind of path in opposition to somebody who doesn't know these things and yet still manages to move.
Right. And I think it, to tie it into the sort of political realm, it makes me think, it makes sense how Ibsen comes to the political conclusions he does, that he is interested in anarchy, he's interested in, well, let's abolish this shit. Let's get rid of these systems, right? And living in the midst of them, in this position he was in, where he was, fairly comfortable, at least for a certain period of his life, but not really having any political influence, any ability to change anything, any ability to whatever. And the whole world seems so big, and it seems to be getting bigger and more, these systems more entrenched because they were. And these systems where, like you said, there can be a butterfly effect that's built in, like a guy pushes one lever and shit happens, kills somebody halfway across the world. His whole thing is he's just like, we'll just stop it. We'll just grind it to a halt, just keep it from happening. And obviously I don't agree with all the positions he had. There's a picture of Vladimir Lenin holding a cat on my wall, but I completely understand how, especially in the conditions he was in, he comes to some of those conditions about we have to neutralize these systems of hierarchy, of oppression. And ultimately, I have massive respect for that. And I have a respect for a lot of things he wrote and what he was able to influence. And this is really cool. And it makes me want to go read more of his shit, to be honest. So I'm really appreciate you bringing this to us, Brian, talking about this. I know Ibsen was thrown around, I think, a year ago as something we might do, and then we were just like, okay, we got a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad it got like brought back around and like brought to our attention here. The last thing I'll say before we sort of have plugs here is I do have an idea for an adaptation of Gibson. It was given to me by when you mentioned that there were cutaways or of Peer Gynt. You mentioned there were cutaways. Imagine it's just Act 5, and the cutaways are all Family Guy cutaway gags. It says, "Remember the time I was with a horde of monkeys?"
Like
the time I
Hussein's
wrote
just
I rolled an elk off the cliff.
Hussein just in a pool of blood, like, you know, in the Family Guy death pose.
Hey, Solvik. Hey, Solvik. The guy's like, your ass is going in the ladle. So anyway, that's my very serious suggestion for an adaptation of
Just
Peer Gynt.
Lois saying, "Paya."
Hey, stay away from the crossroads.
That's pretty good, Lenore. That's a pretty good.
That's really good.
Well, Brian, we appreciate it. I know we said where you're from at the beginning, but if you've got anything to plug or anything, I mean, worst of all possible worlds,
Yeah.
we've had AJ and Josh on the show, and of course we've been on the show. But you know, for those who are new listeners, we've picked up a handful in the last few weeks. Want to tell people what you do?
Yeah,
And
check out
anything
the
else you
Worst
wanna
of All
plug?
Possible Worlds. It's a really fun podcast where we
Mhm.
talk about movies and video games and theater and really just a very wide-ranging a wide span of topics in popular culture, but mostly not books because we're illiterate. And if any of your listeners, any of your new listeners haven't heard of us but have heard of Adventures in Odyssey, you
Mhm.
should check out our podcast.
Yes.
But it will work through some things in your childhood that you may have forgotten about, much like Peer Gynt, forgetting so many events. But aside from that, I don't think I can't think of any projects that I have
That's fine.
coming up theatrically or whatever. Just support the people around you, you know, be good to everyone. There's, of course, a lot of bad shit rolling down the hill over the course of this next month, especially as we lead to this election. And, you know, keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, and always, always, always aim for finding the truth over everything else.
There you
Awesome.
go. And I love Worst of All Possible Worlds really runs this gambit of jumping around. Like, I mean, y'all did stuff on YouTube series, you've done stuff on video games, you've done stuff on very serious movies. There's really can be a lot all over the place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Everything from the Magic School Bus to like James Dobson's final interview with Ted fucking Bundy.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like it all makes sense in context, like alongside in conversation with each other. I promise.
Yeah. And right now we're
yeah.
doing you know, horror stuff. So we just did Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. We've got a little bit of horror in the Christian radio drama universe coming up soon.
Oh boy.
It's all horror, really.
We're gonna talk about Skibbity Toilet at the end of this.
Let's
go.
So it's gonna be a lot of fun. I guess I should also tell people my social medias.
Yes.
I'm on Twitter at Spock's Brian, like the infamous episode of Star Trek, Spock's Brain, Spock's Brian, one word. I'm on Instagram as at uninteresting Brian. This is Brian with an I, of course. And I'm on Blue Sky as I think also Spock's Brian, but I never check it. Sorry.
Yes, we'll make sure we put that in the episode description.
Cool.
Absolutely. And I'll say, you know, you've had a very all over the place run. We will be trying to match that with having last week a James Comey crime novel, this week Peer Gynt, and next week the Sonic Archie comics.
No, no.
So what a back to back to back.
That's gonna be great.
That we always make some fun of that. So stay tuned. Well, Brian, really appreciate you coming on. And Lenore, do you have any I think you had something prepared to bring us home here.
This shit ain't nothing to me, man. We out here in the hall of the Mountain King kicking the Lord's rafters. Rocked up to the wedding party and me and the bride gave him a Norwegian goodbye. That pussy had me cursing the whole tribe of women, all except one. I have seen the Yendine Edge. I have seen the Sphinx of Giza. Greeks tried to step to me, blew up their entire quadrant. Had my stock portfolio looking like the end of Oppenheimer. They say, man, be thyself. How can I be anything but myself? I'm already him.
You have a good one.
Peace out.
Thank you for listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.